week.
Good evening, a warm welcome to all of you to the webinar series hosted by Advocates Association Bengaluru. We have with us today Mr. P.S. Rajgopal, Senior Advocate, High Court of Karnataka. Sir, it's a privilege to have you with us. Welcome to the webinar. Now I take the honor of introducing our speaker to our viewers today. Shri P.S. Rajgopal is a postgraduate in physics who worked as a lecturer for a year. Later, he joined a nationalized bank as an officer. He gave up the bank service to pursue legal profession and enrolled as an advocate in 1987. He was designated as a senior advocate by the High Court of Karnataka in the year 2008. His areas of specialization include constitutional law, administrative law, service law, labor law, revenue law, banking law, education law, just to name a few. In fact, the list goes on. I have stopped it there. Mr. Rajgopal has appeared for State of Karnataka on behalf of Karnataka Public Service Commission, Pollution Control Board, many universities, medical institutions, educational institutions, reputed institutions like NIMHANS, NIT Surathkal, etc. So once again, on behalf of Advocates Association Bangalore, I welcome you to today's webinar. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Trivikram, for the nice words spoken. One advantage of the hard times that we are going through is, I would say, continuing education. In fact, this was a project thought of almost about 10 years ago by the Bar Council, but it could not take off because daytime we are busy in the courts, evening we are busy with preparing for the next day. Now this has given a respite where, with all the negative elements about this COVID, one positive contribution is we are now having time to continue our education. Getting educated at my age is very difficult. In fact, I had to struggle for about 2 days to find out what I should be speaking about. Though people may think that I have been practicing so hugely in service law and labor law, it should not have been difficult. No. In the life of a lawyer, every day is a new challenge. And every time we read a rule, a new meaning to that rule would occur in our own minds. Now let me straight away come. What is the judicial review? To put it simply, judicial review is the process by which higher judiciary, say High Court or Supreme Court, which I would prefer to call as constitutional courts, ensure that legislature, administration, statutory bodies, every one of these, and sometimes including private employers, they act within their bounds. They treat everyone. It may be consumer, it may be an employee, or it may be any other stakeholder fairly. Fairness is the key of judicial review. In fact, in one of the judgments of division bench of our High Court, long years ago, it is said, look, judicial review is not about correctness of the decision. Judicial review is about fairness of procedure followed or the decision-making process. And very interesting observation was made. It is not for us to ensure that after following due process, after treating the opposite party fairly, there is no guarantee, or it is not within our ken to say, to examine whether decision is correct, decision of the administrator is correct on merits. Therefore, what the judicial review ensures is a fair treatment procedurally and nothing beyond. Or to put it differently, merit review is normally not part of judicial review, except where, suppose an employee comes to the office late by about 5 minutes. If for that 5 minutes delay your employer dismisses the employee, then what in law is called as principle of proportionality also can be applied by the courts. The principle of proportionality is a rare test that is generally not taken into consideration by the courts, because to invoke the principle of proportionality, it should be shockingly disproportionate and shocking the judicial conscience of the court. Therefore, though we have enormous case law and enormous talk of judicial review, ultimately, what it ensures is only fairness in action and nothing, and not correctness of action. This is the basic difference, because most of us feel, say a promotion policy is made, which is not to our liking. We immediately think that, yes, a court is there to give us justice. But look at the limitations of the High Court. High Court is not the administrator. High Court is not competent to know what promotion policy is required for which establishment. These are all matters which administrators in respect of enterprises, managements in respect of commercial organizations, government in respect of government employment, or academic bodies like AICTE, Medical Council of India, or Dental Council of India. It is for them to know. It is with all our judicial training and with long years of advocacy, we are not in any better position to advise the administration as to what should be the policy. Theoretically, it can be said that everything is amenable to judicial review. What do you mean, everything? Starting from legislation, of course, which we will not be dealing with today, because pure and simple, in service law and labor law, what we are concerned with is judicial review of administrative action and not beyond that. Starting from legislation up to even an administrative act like transfer, every one of them is available for judicial review. Yes, there we should understand the content of judicial review. So today's talk is going to be on content of the judicial review and its limits. As I was going through the case law to prepare for today's interaction, I found limitations are more than the contents. This is a fact of life. Now, first, let me say about why this judicial review. Our constitution is based on checks and balances. There are three organs of the state: executive, legislature, and the courts. Each organ has its own functions, and courts have a preeminent role, I should say, of the three organs of the state, which our constitution has envisaged. There is clear areas of demarcation. What are the areas of demarcation? High Court can only interpret a rule. If it is unconstitutional, it can strike down the rule. If it is unworkable, it can strike down the rule. But there, the job of the judiciary stops. As it was put in a Laker Airways case, by wearing a robe and perhaps a wig in the olden days, we do not acquire a magic wand to advise everybody on every issue. The job of judiciary stops when when somebody is playing foul. Blow the whistle, stop the game, correct the course. But when ball comes back into action or the play resumes, judiciary cannot advise the players how they should play. For that, there is a separate coach, and judiciary cannot also start playing itself. We are like a referee or a principal body to ensure that executive and legislature remain within their bounds, within their lawful boundaries. We are not here to advise anybody. And it is another matter, of course, sometimes in the course of judgments, some amount of advice may be there. That is more out of agony of the judiciary, that things are going from bad to worse and not really playing the role of an advisor. There are two aspects in today's subject. One is contents and limitations from service law perspective and from labor law perspective. Why these two perspectives are different is something that we'll have to appreciate. Now let us take a case where contract of employment is there. Generally, or in fact, I may say invariably, the contract of employment is not enforceable because there is a bar in law about specific performance of contract of service. During the period of Industrial Revolution, it was found necessary that state should interfere in these industrial disputes on behalf of weaker party. When you take management on one side and workmen on the other side, it doesn't need great intellectual exercise to say workman is a weaker party. Therefore, these labor laws were evolved to keep the wheels of production going, at the same time ensuring that weaker of the two parties, namely the workforce, gets a better deal. That is how the concept of labor law developed. Insofar as service law is concerned, originally under the Government of India Act, the only guarantee was that if you want to dismiss, discharge, or compulsorily retire a permanent civil servant, a inquiry will have to be held as contemplated by Article 311. And second guarantee was that an authority who is
Praveen, did we have senior disconnected?
I'm finding it. ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ.
Just check it on the panel.
Allow ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಬಂದ್ರು ಸರ್ ಬಂದ್ರು.
Also.
Unmute ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ.
There, the concept of protection was slightly different from labor law because labor law was made or has been evolved keeping in mind the gulf of disparity in strength between the workmen and management. Therefore, first thing that the labor law ensured was that contract of employment itself should be fair. If we leave it to the hands of the capital or the management, however benevolent the management may be, the workmen, because of their obviously inferior bargaining strength, they may not get a reasonable deal. Therefore, it is keeping this aspect in mind that the labor law concepts have evolved. Now, what is the difference between service law and labor law? In labor law, the conditions of service can be created by the labor court or industrial tribunal. Whereas in service law, court has no right to create a condition of service. It can only interpret a condition of service. It can only strike down an unconstitutional or unfair condition of service. Secondly, in service law, take the case of a normal occurrence in the court every day we are seeing. Suppose an officer or an employee who is not a workman is
I guess network issue ಇದೆ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್ ಇದು.
ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಜಯಂತಿ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್. ಪ್ರವೀಣ್ ರೀಲಾಗಿನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್. ರೀಲಾಗಿನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್, ಆಯ್ತು ಆಯ್ತು, ನಾನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ.
ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್. ಪ್ರವೀಣ್ ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಸರ್ನ.
ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry for the this one. I don't know why the internet is behaving little.
Not a problem.
It happens, in fact, when computerization was being discussed in place of manual banking about 35 years ago. I was assuring my clients, don't worry about computer and internet because we will always be having jobs. That was about 35 years ago I used to say. Now we have improved a lot, but then still these hiccups are bound to be there. I was on the question of difference between labor law and service. The service jurisprudence has been evolved only on the lines of procedural fairness. Take, for example, the disciplinary proceedings. I was on that question. If in service jurisprudence the reviewing court finds that inquiry has not been fair or proper and employee has not been given a reasonable opportunity to defend, all that the court can do is it can strike down the action and then remand the matter to the employer to hold a fresh inquiry. Most of the times, that may not be an adequate remedy because having once dismissed, the general tendency is not to see the face of the employee again in the enterprise. That is the reason labor law is evolved on totally different concept. Suppose a workman raises a dispute regarding dismissal before the labor court. What the labor court can do? Labor court would first examine whether the inquiry is fair and proper. If it comes to the conclusion that the inquiry is not fair, then labor court itself conducts the inquiry afresh so that management with a baggage of history would not deal with that employee again. The second inquiry, if the first inquiry by the management is not fair and proper, would be held by the labor court itself. And even in cases where inquiry is held to be fair and proper, the labor court has got enormous discretion to substitute the penalty if it comes to conclude that it is disproportionate or it is in the nature of victimization. This is the essential difference in the matter of disciplinary proceedings. Now, there are some areas of service jurisprudence also, which are more or less like labor laws. Like, for example, a teacher in a private educational institution. If you apply the principles of service law or contract law, since the contract of employment cannot be specifically enforced in the normal course, but for the educational appellate tribunal, whose powers are regulated by the Education Act, a teacher cannot be reinstated. But the Educational Appellate Tribunal has been created in such a manner, with its mandate being identical to that of the labor court. Yes, the labor court, Educational Appellate Tribunal, though falling under service jurisprudence, and to some extent, cooperative tribunals, they are different from normal concept of judicial review that we have in service law. Not only that, in service law, when service conditions, even pay scales or discomfort allowances or promotion policies, these are evolved by the employer. When they are challenged under judicial review, the reviewing court cannot substitute its wisdom and cannot say that this policy would be better than what you have evolved, therefore kindly adopt this policy. No, that is not the function in service law. Whereas in labor law, starting from evolution of pay scales, working hours, allowances, retirement benefits, every one of these service conditions can be created by the industrial tribunals and labor courts. So normally what we say is, while in the labor jurisprudence, courts can create service conditions. In service jurisprudence, courts can only interpret the conditions of service. And apart from interpreting, the only power it has is if something is unconstitutional, it can strike down. Now, but in the matter of promotions, there is absolutely no difference between labor law and service law. In the matter of labor court, in the matter of labor jurisprudence, there are some cases, but they are very stray, where by an award, as for example in Gramina banks, what we call as regional rural banks, even promotional policy was evolved almost by an industrial tribunal. Of course, that was a very hybrid tribunal. Within its sweep, both the workmen and officers were there. That is a different aspect. Generally, labor law creates the rights, service law only interprets the rights and nothing more. We cannot create a condition of service. Now let us see what are the principal areas of judicial review in service law. One is the procedural impropriety. That is, if a stipulated procedure has not been followed. Now, what is the stipulated procedure? Procedure stipulated with rule applicable is the stipulated procedure. If the stipulated procedure is not followed, then the order can be annulled by the court. That is called as the procedural impropriety. That is a ground for judicial review. Then the second ground is irrationality. What is this irrationality? It is very difficult to explain. One concept of irrationality is, it is for the employer to decide what should be the qualifications for the job, or what qualification, persons with what qualifications he would recruit. It is not for the court. But there are two circumstances under which the judicial review would be available. The glorious cases where, for the post of a lecturer in English, if you stipulate he should be an MA in English, he must pass NET in English, and he should possess a certificate in Bharatanatyam. To the extent of prescription of Bharatanatyam, the court will be entitled to strike down. That is the irrationality. A totally no sane thinking person would prescribe qualification. That should be the extent of perversity in the qualifications prescribed. Then only the judicial review would be available against that aspect of the matter. Otherwise, normally, it is for the employer to decide. In fact, long ago, before our own High Court, there was a very interesting case. A person who was blind in one eye, he was refused appointment as officer in State Bank of India on the ground that he was one-eyed. Remember, that was a time when persons with the Equal Participation Act, persons with disabilities of that act had not come into force. When I stood up, the response of the court was very, very classic, in the sense, classical mold of looking at law. What is the classical mold? I was told, look, it is for the employer to prescribe the qualifications. How can you question? Of course, after anonymous hearing, the writ petition was allowed. It was said that merely because a person is one-eyed, you cannot refuse him employment. If the medical certificate should record a finding that his disability is of such a nature that he will not be able to discharge the duties he is required to perform in employment. That should be the level of irrationality if the court has to interfere. Suppose somebody says, say UGC says that a person with 55% marks in postgraduate is eligible. Say a particular university says, I want persons with 65%, not 55%. Then the court cannot interfere. But where the rule is such that it is unworkable, then the courts can interfere. That is again coming within the concept of irrationality. Unworkability is an aspect of irrationality. How it can, how this can arise? We know normally a person enters employment in good times, not in a situation where there is rampant unemployment. Say in a situation where employment opportunities are good. After completing post-graduation, a person may become a lecturer in a university at the age of 25 to 28. Then there is direct recruitment. He prescribe that for the post of associate professor, which requires say 8 or 10 years of experience as an assistant professor or lecturer. If you prescribe maximum age limit of say 32 years or 35 years, if you have experience, you would be age barred. If you are within the age, you will not possess the experience. That is called as unworkability. Our own High Court struck down a rule in the general recruitment rules where the age limit of 35 years was prescribed for ex-servicemen. We must remember that there is a certain amount of reservation in favor of ex-servicemen in public employment. There they have to work for 7 to 10 years to get discharged from the armed forces. And with that, unless he has completed 10 years, he cannot come out and apply for public employment. If you prescribe an age limit of 35 years, the court held it will be unworkable. Therefore, the unworkability is one ground on which judicial review is available. Irrationality is another area where the judicial review is available. Third is illegality. What is the illegality? Illegality is, suppose a person who is not authorized to take a decision, he takes a decision, then it is a case of lack of authority, which can also be called as illegality. Now, illegalities may arise in several circumstances. First thing that comes to mind when we talk of illegality is it is contrary to the laid down law. Laid down law may be recruitment rule or rule dealing with promotions, rule dealing with disciplinary actions. Several rules are there. If any of the rule is violated, it will fall foul of law as being illegal order. Therefore, these are the 4 principal grounds on which an administrative action can be judicially reviewed that is procedural impropriety, illegality, irrationality, and proportionality. Proportionality is more readily applied in labor law than in service law. Now, there is another area where the judicial review will be available. That is where contract of service or conditions of service are opposed to public policy. Most of you would be aware that even now, unfortunately, this rule remains on the rule book, but nobody dare invoke it. There is a rule in most of the enterprises that a permanent employee can be removed from service without assigning any reason by giving him 3 months notice. You would have worked in the enterprise for 20 years, 25 years. If the employer holds a view that this man should not be anymore here, by giving 3 months notice, his services can be dismissed with. And what is done normally is the clauses would say either 3 months notice or 3 months pay in lieu of notice. That means instant, what you get is 3 months salary, so that during those 3 months, you can use the salary to find an alternate employment. This is called as Henry V clause or whatever clause is. A very interesting question. The context was that, after all, it is a mutual contract. The employer has signed the contract, the employee has signed the contract. And that contract contains this clause of dispensation with the services with 3 months notice. Having signed a contract, how can you question it now? It is a mutual contract. It is an equal contract. I have right to terminate his services with 3 months notice, and he has right to resign with. Supreme Court made a very glorious statement. The equality between employer and employee is like equality between lion and a lamb. Both lion and lamb are in the forest. Both are free to roam around wherever they want to. Both are free to eat whatever they want to. Then Supreme Court said, this concept of equality is laughable at the best and primitive at the worst. And Supreme Court went to the extent of saying, to accept this argument, we will have to put the clock back by a few centuries about the equality between the two. And one heartening feature of that judgment was, that judgment came in respect of contract of employment of an officer and not a workman. But these considerations would not apply when we are talking of private sector employment. Private sector employment, no judicial review is available, except in case of workmen. And even it is very difficult to invoke Section 23 of the Contract Act. Section 23 of the Contract Act, the basis for the Supreme Court to strike down that 3 months notice and dispensation of services clause. But I doubt very much whether that would be applicable. Now, when I'm talking, one thing you would have observed, is the service law. Is there is no in which we find all these principles. These principles of administrative law mostly made by the judiciary. There is one great contribution that the judiciary has made for a rule of law to survive in this society. The entire administrative law is made by judges and not by the legislature. It creates two problems. A legislature made law, we can argue that it is contrary to a particular section, therefore strike it down. In a judge-made law, there are advantages and disadvantages also. Advantage is, it has the situational flexibility. The court can see whether in the facts and circumstances of this case, whether employee has been given a fair treatment. Entire concept of administrative law is fairness in action. Whether the employee has been treated fairly. Therefore, the judge-made law, the very concept of judge-made law gives us situational flexibility. But at the same time, it renders the law complicated in as much as two exactly identical situations we rarely find. There will always be factual differences, and Supreme Court has said one comma here, the difference of one comma here or one full stop there makes enormous difference. That is the reason service law is, I don't know whether I can use it. Service law is, it is said, not certain in the sense that we do not know ultimately whether a particular principle of law would become applicable in a particular case or not, because particularly when it comes to exercise of discretion. But there is a fifth ground on which judicial review of administrative action can take place. That is called third-party dictation. Submission to third-party dictation. What is this third-party dictation? When we speak in administrative law about third-party dictation, what comes to our mind is, to any student of constitutional law, Govardhan Das Bansi. In that case, what had happened? Commissioner of Police was the licensing authority. The government issued him a direction, you issue license or you do not issue license. Commissioner faithfully implemented the decision of the government, styling it as his decision. Then the Supreme Court said, Commissioner did not take any decision. He only communicated the decision of the government. Therefore, it is a submission to third-party dictation. Now, all of you, if you look at what is happening today in the either government or public sector undertakings, statutory bodies, most of the times the managements fall foul of submission to third-party dictations. This is called in administrative law as power at wrong hands. Law confers power on somebody, it is exercised by somebody else. This is submission to external dictation is a ground for judicial review. How it will arise? Take the case of Central Vigilance Commission. As we have Lokayukta in the state, there is Central Vigilance Commission at the center. In respect of public sector employees or central government employees, every disciplinary action, consultation with the Vigilance Commission becomes necessary. Like at the state level, Lokayukta holds an investigation and submits a report. In the report it says, government is kindly requested to. They are very, very careful about usage of phrases. It is not a command. It is a request. Initiate disciplinary proceedings. Second sentence, entrust the inquiry to us. Then inquiry is over. Report of inquiry of an inquiry officer appointed by the Lokayukta, along with Lokayukta's opinion, comes to the government. Similarly, Central Vigilance Commission's advice, both as to guilt and also as to penalty, comes to the government or the enterprise. The tendency is as if the recommendation of this third party is binding on the employer, because law itself says the competent authority can take a decision and communicate to the Lokayukta or to the Central Vigilance Commission. But these competent authorities invariably proceed as if they have no discretion in the matter. Proceed as if what is said by Central Vigilance Commission or Lokayukta is ultimate and we have no power to differ with that. This is a very wrong approach, and judicial review will be available if the sufferer is able to establish before the court that the decision-making authority has not merely consulted a third party, though permissible in law, but has submitted himself to the dictation of the third party, abandoning his quasi-judicial discretion. In fact, the earliest it was said by a division bench of our High Court that was a case arising under Urban Land Sealing and Regulation Act. Central government had framed certain guidelines as to how the discretion to exempt from land sealing has to be exercised by the authorities. Division bench said, quasi-judicial functioning does not admit any third-party interference. To put it differently, the moment third party interferes or third party's interference is allowed, even if the central government, the function will not remain a quasi-judicial function. In fact, third party interference is destructive of quasi-judicial independence. Now, let me straight away come to what is this natural justice, because procedural impropriety, I said, is one of the grounds on which the judicial review would be available. Two major issues apart from procedure in natural justice is bias, or to what the Supreme Court said in one of the cases as, if the person who holds the inquiry, suppose he comes with an instruction, quote, fix him up, unquote. A person who sits in judgment with a view to fix up somebody is disqualified from sitting as a judge. There is another case where, in fact, this was the earliest of the things. Disciplinary authority appears before the inquiry officer, gives his evidence, On the basis of evidence, inquiry officer prepares a report holding the employee guilty. The moment that inquiry report is received, he sits as disciplinary authority and dismisses the employee. That is, being a judge in his own cause, accepting his own evidence to be true. That is how one bias can arise. Another way a bias can arise is, take a case where there are 4 or 5 employees of equal rank. All of them are due for promotion to the next higher rank. One of them is charge sheeted. Another of those 4 cannot sit in an inquiry because the career interests of this man are dependent upon dismissal of the other man. That is where personal interest comes. This is another area of what I should say, bias. Then the bias can occur in several ways. It is a part of natural justice that a person who sits in judgment should be without any preconceived leanings. That is why we see in every court hall, the scales of justice should be held even. That applies not only to the justice, that applies to quasi-judicial proceedings also. Another case, take the case where one of the candidates who is being considered for appointment or promotion, that is a case of A.K. Kraipak, where a candidate himself was part of the selection committee. Naturally, we know what would be the result of the selection. Or where a close relative of a candidate due for selection sits there. These are the cases of bias, and in respect, if in case of established bias, courts have no hesitation to set aside the action because it will be quorum non judice. This concept is of very great significance, and that is the only guarantee to see that an interested man does not sit in judgment over the lives of ordinary persons. He should have no premeditation. He should be able to hold the scales of justice even. This applies whether it is disciplinary action or whether it is selection, whatever it is. The other concept, other ingredient of natural justice is giving reasons. In a number of rules, you would find that the management may dismiss an employee or terminate the service of an employee without assigning any reasons. There are such clauses. Whether such clauses will be valid or not, that is a different aspect. But in law, there is a difference between taking an action without assigning any reason, taking action without there being any reason. And between the two. When law says you need not assign any reason for administrative orders as distinguished from quasi-judicial orders. It is not that you can take action without there being any reason. Therefore, the courts have made this distinction. If you are dealing with an employee in a quasi-judicial capacity, then reason should be stated in the order itself. But if you are dealing with an employee in an administrative capacity, There must be reasons in the file. You need not disclose. The difference is simple. Say you are discharging a probationer from service as unsuitable. You cannot state all those reasons in the order, because if you state the reasons in the order, it becomes punitive. But when in its exercise of judicial review powers, matter is before the court, the employer is bound to produce the records which must show the recorded reasons for dispensing with the services of an employee. Irrespective of the nature of function in administrative law, reasons are very crucial. It is always said, reason is one safeguard against arbitrariness, against recklessness in taking administrative decisions. Reasons are the link by which you can know why your say or why your reply or why your case has not met with the approval of the authority, and why an adverse action, I would not use the word punitive, an adverse action has been taken against. Existence of reasons is very important. An unbiased person sitting in judgment is very important. Then, of course, elementary principles of natural justice is everybody should be a person who is being proceeded against with. He must be told the case he has to meet very clearly. He must, the evidence in support of the allegation, it must be produced in his presence. The employee should have an opportunity to test the veracity of that evidence by cross-examination. And the employee should also be given an opportunity to produce all that evidence he wants to rely upon in support of his case. These are the basic principles of natural justice. And if there is any breach of natural justice, the classical theory was that violation of natural justice itself is prejudicial. No further prejudice is need to be proved. But now the judicial thinking has changed substantially. It is not enough if the citizen or the employee establishes that natural justice has been breached, but he should also establish what is the prejudice caused to him by the breach of that natural justice. This is what in law is called as useless formality theory. That is, after suppose the court says that you are not held the inquiry properly, this opportunity has not been given. That is not sufficient to annul the adverse order. He has to establish what he would have been able to do if that opportunity has been given. Whereas in case of incompetence, in case of bias, the question of proving prejudice is not required. These are the broad contours of judicial review in service law and in labor law. Labor law is more effective remedy in as much as the courts can make the rule, court can create a service condition and all that. Then proportionality, I'll conclude by saying a few more words about proportionality. Proportionality arises not only in disciplinary proceedings. It arises even in the matter of recruitment tests. We frequently, because this is something that is happening very frequently, I am adverting to that. For recruitment tests are conducted, maybe by the Public Service Commission or by the Karnataka Education Authority or Union Public Service Commission. There are a number of agencies which conduct these recruitment. Many times, allegations of malpractice in the examinations are there. And sometimes, the entire examination is annulled either by the court or by the selecting body itself. Of course, when the courts annul the examination is a different matter. But when the selecting body annuls the examination, the question of proportionality arises. The question is always, don't annul or negate a thing beyond requirement. Suppose there is allegation of malpractice in one examination hall in one examination center. Cancelling the entire examination all over the state or all over the country would be irrational, high-handed, and it would be disproportionate. But at the same time, suppose there is reasonable faith, belief that question papers have been leaked. It may not be wholly true, it may not be wholly untrue. But there is a reasonable suspicion that there could have been a possibility that the allegation is perhaps probable. In such case, the theory of proportionality would not arise, because where all it has been leaked, who are all the beneficiaries, to what extent the examination process has been vitiated, there is no thumb rule to ascertain it. Then to maintain probity in recruitment process and purity of the recruitment test, even if the entire examination is undone, courts would not normally interfere. Ultimately, the question is whether the action taken by the administrator is proportionate to the evil that he is seeking to remedy. This is the test of proportionality. Friends, I think my time is up now, and Mr. Trivikram has told me that there would be a few questions. Questions would be an education for me. Therefore, I would now, with permission of all of you, stop here and look forward to questions.
Thank you, sir. That was a very educative session. Now let's move on to the question and answer session. I request all the learned members to put forth your questions, and parallelly I request Praveen to unmute all the lines.
Unmuted, sir.
Thank you. Learned members, you can put forth your questions. Santosh Nagarale, sir.
ಸರ್ ನಮಸ್ತೆ
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ
ಸರ್. ಸರ್ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಒಂದ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಲೋಕಾಯುಕ್ತ ಎನ್ಕ್ವೈರಿ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವರು ರೆಕಮೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಸರ್ ಪನಿಷ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಪನಿಷ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರೆಕಮೆಂಡ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ನಮ್ ಕೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸರ್, ಡಿಸ್ಮಿಸಲ್ ರೆಕಮೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಬಟ್ ಅವರು ಇನ್ಕ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಪನಿಷ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ರು ಸರ್ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದು ಅವ್ರ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಸರ್ ವಾಪಸ್ಸು ದೇ ಸೆಡ್ ವೈ ಯು ಇಂಪೋಸ್ಡ್ ಲೆಸರ್ ಪನಿಷ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ರೀಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಸರ್. ದೇ ಪಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅನದರ್ ಪನಿಷ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್. ಈ ತರ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೌ ದಿ ಲೋಕಾಯುಕ್ತ ಇಸ್ imposing its aspect on the punishment aspect, its power on the...
If you look at section 12(4)
please
of the Lokayukta Act, it is for the competent authority to take a decision whether to accept the report of the Lokayukta or not.
Please.
Then in the matter of disciplinary proceedings, if you look at Rule 11 capital A of KCSCCA rules,
Yes.
power to frame charge is delegated to the Lokayukta if you entrust the inquiry to them. If you don't entrust the inquiry to them, they have no such power.
Yes.
Holding an inquiry is delegated to them, but not taking a decision on the inquiry,
Yes.
because that is essential function of the disciplinary authority. Earlier, there was one directive issued by the central government Ministry of Finance,
Yes.
way back, about 20 years back, or 25 years maybe. That is Karajgi and versus Syndicate Bank.
Yes.
The finance minister had sent a directive to every bank that when Central Vigilance Commission recommends a penalty,
Yes.
the bank is bound to implement it or impose it. That was held by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional because
Yes.
it is for the disciplinary authority to decide whether to hold an employee guilty or not. After all, Upalokayukta or Lokayukta is only inquiry officer.
Yes.
Nothing. Inquiry officer's findings never bind the employer. Disciplinary authority can always say, I don't agree with your view. All that is required is, in case disciplinary authority wants to upset a favorable finding of the inquiry officer, he has to give a notice and hear the inquiry. If he wants to annul an adverse finding, even notice is not required. What penalty is to be imposed, whether it will be guilty, these are within the exclusive domain of the disciplinary authority. And more importantly, once the disciplinary authority passes an order
Yes.
of imposing penalty or exonerating the employee, he becomes functus officio. And Lokayukta cannot be issuing continuing mandamus to the disciplinary authority until he imposes the penalty that is acceptable to the. If we accept such a situation, the state will be converted into a police Raj, because let us look into the reality. Who conducts the investigation in Lokayukta?
Yes.
A sub-inspector of police or inspector of police? What inspector of police writes, without meaning any disrespect to anybody, I am sharing my experience. What the inspector of police writes becomes the word of ADGP.
Yes.
What the ADGP writes becomes the word of Lokayukta. Very rarely we find any difference between them. The question is, would we like to continue as civil society bound by rule of law, or would we surrender our discretions and become a police Raj? In fact, the second directive of the Lokayukta is absolutely without authority of law. If an employer does not accept the views of the Lokayukta, as in the case of Central Vigilance Commission,
Yes.
all that can happen is a report may be made to the governor about the non-implementation of the recommendations of the Lokayukta, which will be laid before the assembly along with the annual report of the Lokayukta. Nothing more, nothing less. Same thing with Central Vigilance Commission. That is the reason, irrespective of the agency which advises, it is only advisory and it is not a command. If it is a command, it is unlawful. This is the position, and it is for the, if the second order of penalty is challenged, court should not be taking more than 10 minutes to set it aside. That is the position. In fact, in my preparatory note, I had mentioned this, Santosh, but
Yes.
since time was running out, I thought I will not go into the specifics of this type of cases.
Yes.
And it is good that you raised this question,
Thank you.
because that is what is unfortunately happening in this state.
Yes. Grateful. ತಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಗುರುವಾರ ಸರ್ ಮತ್ತೆ
ಇಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ಹಾಗೇನಿಲ್ಲ.
ನನ್ ಜೀವನ ಶೇಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಸರ್ ತಾವು.
ಇಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. See, every senior has a duty to encourage and support the junior colleagues. I won't call you juniors, junior colleagues to come up so that profession will be more erudite, educated, efficient, and it will stand up to any occasion. That is how I have been functioning. I am grateful to you.
Thank you. I'm indebted to you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more questions?
ಹಲೋ ಹಲೋ
Yes,
Yes, sir.
ಸರ್, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಚಂದ್ರಶೇಖರ್ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು.
yes, Mr. Chandrasekhar.
ನನ್ನ ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ನಾನು ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತದೆ, ಹೇಳಿ.
ಸರ್, ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ರಿ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಲೇಬರ್ ಲಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಲಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ರಿ ಆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಸರಿ, ಓಕೆ, ಎಲ್ಲವೂ. EPF 95 ಪೆನ್ಷನರ್ ಫ್ಲೈಟ್ ಇವತ್ತಿಗೆ ಬಹಳ ದುಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಏನ್ ಕಾರಣ? ನಾವು ಕೋರ್ಟ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲ ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಆಗಿ.
See, in the
EPF
labor law-
95 ಪೆನ್ಷನರ್ಸ್ ಫ್ಲೈಟ್ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ.
ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು. EPF 95, that pension scheme, the pension that a workman gets is dismally low. Let me accept that position.
Okay.
In fact, not only the pension scheme under the EPF Act, but the EPF Act itself is a losing proposition for the workman. Every month, deductions will be made from your salary.
Okay.
But you get the corpus back only on your retirement.
Oh, surely.
Examine this aspect. When the cost of living index is 100, you start contributing.
Surely.
It will be returned to you when cost of living index is 1000 or 2000. That means value of rupee that you contributed would have got down or reduced to 10 paisa or 20 paisa. This is something basically unjust consequence of Employees Provident Fund Act.
Okay.
Because you contribute when value of rupee is high, you get back when value of rupee is corroded.
Okay.
For this, the only alternative can be a contributory pension fund with assured returns, not very uncertain returns. I agree with you that the quantum of pension that is paid under the EPF 95 scheme is very, very poor. And if an employee, instead of contributing to Provident Fund every month, if he had invested in any other security,
Okay.
any other investment, any other instrument, the return he would get at the time of retirement is more. Therefore, according to me, this is my personal view. This is not I am not speaking for anybody. According to my view, the EPF Act requires thorough overhauling. But at the same time, remember this. Left to employer, particularly in private sector, employers would not be getting even this much, which they are getting under the EPF Act. This is a thing that can be overcome by mass movement of the workers. This cannot be given by any court of law, because let me tell you, courts protect the rights. They cannot create new rights.
Okay.
Except in limited areas. Therefore, I agree with you that the status of pensioners under the EPF Act is very heart-rendering. What we get is very, very minimal, but remedy to situate the situation can be remedied by workers' movements and not by lawyers' arguments.
However, the High Court of Kerala, as well as
Yes.
Supreme Court, upheld that these poorer pensioner must be given the half of the salary, that is what they are.
That they
got-
said.
Mm.
That they said. Has it been implemented?
Why there is again?
No, madam. The point is, it is like telling at the time of beginning of the COVID, no salary should be cut. How many employers are paid full salary? See, these are things ultimately law gives only a broad framework. Forward movement can be achieved in these areas only by determined efforts of the concerned interest group and not by anybody. The law can only guide you, but ultimately effort should be that of workmen and its bodies, not anybody else. In fact, pension funds all over the world are facing difficulties. Employers say that we are unable to pay pension. Government also has, for the last 10 years, made it a contributory pension scheme. Earlier, it was not like that. Earlier, it was absolutely contribution free. Now the things have changed. Law needs to be changed, but law will not change because of our wishful thinking. It requires effort.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for your good.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
good evening. This is Mallikarjun.
Yes, sir.
Sir, at the outset, I would like to thank Bar Association Bangalore for arranging this webinar series. This is more informative and the insightful discussions is going on. Sir, I am very much delighted to hear that webinar series. My questions to senior advocate. As you said, sir, there is no judicial review is available in a private sector employment.
Yes.
Suppose if the private sector employment in a probation period, if the employee is dismissing without any reason given, what is the remedy for that employee? Whether you could take any action or challenging it in judicial review? As you said that section 23 of the contract is not applicable like that.
So section 23 of the Contract Act may not apply in case of a provision in the contract enabling the employer to dismiss or to discharge a probationer. But it is not that you are remediless. Remedy is available. That remedy is short of reinstatement. You can challenge the unlawful termination of contract of service in a civil court. When you raise the challenge by way of a civil, suit, the only difficulty is civil court cannot order reinstatement because it amounts to specific performance of contract of service. Therefore, that remedy of reinstatement would not be available. But you can claim damages for wrongful termination of contract. Therefore, damages will be a mitigating remedy, but not reinstatement.
But sir, during the probation period, if they terminated as per the employment contract, if the service is not up to the mark, or if it is a review of the management, if they're not satisfied the requirement of the management during the probation period, if the employee is dismissed, still we can approach civil court.
Even then you can approach civil court if you say that, if you are able to establish that the alleged unsuitability is a facade and real reason to terminate or discharge is something beyond that. But one thing we should all remember is that insofar as probationer's service is concerned, it is a relationship is very tenuous. Even in government employment, and that much more tenuous when it comes to private employment. Because once they will write, found not suitable. In one case, it was written, being satisfied that he is not going to be a good police officer, he is discharged. The unsuitability is a determination of unsuitability is the right of the employer, but even then, judicial review or civil court's intervention is not wholly barred. It has to be, challenge has to be raised on a strong foundation of facts, which are hard to get. Normally what happens is, managements do not record in their files, I don't want to see this man's face, therefore send him out. They will still have recorded, performance is not satisfactory, therefore see him off. They want to send out, but they use the phrase see off.
Thank you, sir. If they want reinstatement, the writ remedy is available?
In private sector, no, because it is, unless there is an element of public law involved, reinstatement is not permissible, writ remedy is not available.
Thank you very
Whereas
much.
in labor jurisprudence, where if he is a workman, against the award of the labor court, a writ petition would lie, and the Supreme Court has taken a view in a writ petition questioning the award of the labor court. High Court has got all the powers of a labor court. That means whatever labor court can do, High Court also can do in a challenge against the award of the labor court, but not in other areas of service jurisprudence or the private employer-employee relationship.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Sir, Girish here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Girish, please.
Yeah. It's really highly informative and it is helping us a lot. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir. It's really enlightening us. Sir, I have one specific question. What legal remedy that I have when employer not contributed employer part in the PF account of the employee?
In not remitting the contributions punctually within the timeline stipulated by the Act is an offense. All that you have to do in such cases is make a complaint to the PF inspector. PF inspector will inspect and economic offenses case can be booked. Also, proceedings can be initiated against the employer by the Provident Fund authorities to ensure that he contributes. If he does not contribute, the PF dues of the employer towards the employees constitute the first charge on the assets of the employer. Suppose the employer establishment goes into liquidation. First charge on the assets of the firm in liquidation is the workman dues like Provident Fund, gratuity, and therefore it is recoverable. Only thing is the process is so long, we may not get it when we need it, but we should be happy when we get it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
Any more questions?
Yes, Mr. Venkatesh Doderi, Heli.
ಸರ್ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸರ್, ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ್ ದೊಡ್ಡೇರಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್.
ಹೇಳಿ ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ್.
ಬಹಳ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಟಿವ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್. ಈ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಗೇನೋ ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈಗ ಇದೊಂದು ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ. ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಬಂದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಬಹಳ ಜನ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ನ ತೆಗೆದು ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಒಂದಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಕಾರಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿ. ಅದೇ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಇಮಿಡಿಯೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ರಿಲೀಫ್ ತಗೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ಈ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ತಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಅನಿಸಿಕೆ ಏನು, ಅಥವಾ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ತಮ್ಮ ಸಲಹೆ ಏನು ಸರ್?
ಇದು ಗ್ರಹಣ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಸೂರ್ಯ ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ವರ್ಕ್ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಗೂ ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ, ಅಡ್ವೊಕೇಟ್ಸ್ಗೂ ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ, ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯರ್ಗೂ ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಕೆಲವರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಡ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್. ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ಲಿ workman is not concerned with the literature. Workman is concerned with the relief. Ega, I should admit that even Supreme Court failed in the sense when employers went before the Supreme Court. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಸಂಬಳ ಕೊಡಿ ಅಂತ ಆರ್ಡರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಕೋಯರ್ಸಿವ್ ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. We are unable to pay, you interfere with this number. Court could have examined what is the humanitarian relief it can grant. Instead of granting the relief, it said employers and employees are free to negotiate. Free to negotiate ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? ಈ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ when the industry is not working, we cannot go on strike because work ಇದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ strike ಆಗೋದು. And even to mobilize people is not possible. In such a situation, it is the duty of the judiciary to interfere on behalf of the weaker party. Unfortunately, what the Supreme Court says, because what Supreme Court says is law. Article 141 ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ apply ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Supreme Court said you go and negotiate. And we are negotiating. We means workers are negotiating. I do not, ಇದು ಒಂದು ಕರಾಳ ಕಾಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ವರ್ಕ್ಮನ್ಗೆ. Unfortunately, government which issued the directive under the Disaster Management Act that no retrenchment should be there, no salary cut should be there, it is not in a position to implement it. Only thing is, the remedy to us is a mandamus to implement the directive. Mandamus to implement the directive. Now, before the High Court may not be so fruitful because Supreme Court itself said, don't take coercive action against the employer for not paying. Then employers went and said, no coercive action against that ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಸ್ಟೇ ಆರ್ಡರ್ ಕೊಡಬಹುದು. ನಾನು ಹಸುವಿಂದ ಸಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ, ಇದಕ್ಕೇನು ಸ್ಟೇ ಆರ್ಡರ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಗೋ ಅಂಡ್ ನೆಗೋಷಿಯೇಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. When it is like times of Great Depression, when no law will work because of the factual situation, you have to share. What is always said is, society is not only to share the benefits, it is also there, societal interest and societal camaraderie should be there, even when we share the agonies, even when we share the hardships. And today the situation is, all of us will have to share the agony, looking forward to a day when we can share the benefits also. Pray for ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು ಪ್ರೇಯರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓದಂಗೆ ಕಾಣೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಕೊರೋನಾ.
ಆದ್ರೆ
we cannot do anything better than that.
ಸರ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್ ಸರ್. ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಆ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಂಗ ಆಗ್ಲಿಲ್ವೇ? ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್, ಲೈಫ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಲೇಬರ್ಸ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಾಪಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ,
ಕಾಪಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇದೆ. ಈಗ unions are not in a position to fight. Supreme Court has failed to interfere. Therefore, we have to wait for a better day when workers are in a position to fight. But I have one suspicion in my mind that workers appears to have lost zeal to fight. The situation of despondency and gloom is so huge. I do not know whether we still have that human instinct to fight. This can be changed only by mass movement, and unfortunately, mass movement I don't see anywhere. ಎಲ್ಲೂ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಹೌದು ಸರ್.
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಆಫೀಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಪೌರ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರದ್ದು ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಪೌರ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಳ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾವಿನ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ವರ್ಕರ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೇಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ? 2 ದಿನ ಅವ್ರು ಬರದೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಬದುಕಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಸಂಬಳ ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಇಲ್ಲ. This is not what I am saying. This is what the mighty governments are saying.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
ಏನೋ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ದಿನ ಬರ್ಲಿ ಸರ್.
ಒಳ್ಳೆ ದಿನ ಬರ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಒಂದ್ ವೇ ಈಸ್ ಎವ್ರಿಬಡಿ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟ್ರಬಲ್.
ಅಲ್ಲ ವಿ ಟು ಸರ್, ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ತೊಂದರೆಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀವಿ.
ನಾವು ಸಹ ಕಷ್ಟದಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೀವಿ ಈಗ. ಯಾಕೆ ಎವ್ರಿಬಡಿ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟ್ರಬಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಪರ್ಹ್ಯಾಪ್ಸ್ ಅವರು ಇಲ್ಲ ಪಾಪ. ಈಗ ಎವ್ರಿಬಡಿ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ಟ್ರಬಲ್ ಅಂತಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು.
ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ರಾಜಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಸರ್.
That way I say happiness is a state of mind anta. If you apply that, I am happy.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Grateful to you, sir, for all your enlightenment. And grateful to Mr. Ranganath and his team for organizing such a wonderful program.
No, I am thankful to them that they gave me this opportunity because
Please, sir. Please, sir.
court ಗೆ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರನ್ನು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೋದು. We can exchange views. ಈಗ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಂಟೀನ್ ಕಾಫಿನೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಮಗೆ.
Mr. Venkatesh has already done my work, sir. So my many thanks to you. You have graciously accepted our invitation. You have enriched our knowledge. So we are very much grateful to you, sir.
Trivikrama, I should say thanks to senior.
How's sir? Our secretary is also conveying his regards, sir.
ಗಂಗಾಧರನವರೇ, thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. I am seeing you virtually. I am very happy to see smiling face of my seniors.
Not only seniors, all of us are smiling today.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, sir. We are grateful to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
With your permission, sir, we are logging off. We are concluding the session, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gangadharanore.
Thank you, Venkatesh. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.